Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another round of sound. This is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Bob Pompeani, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to get into the Penguins, who are a surprise team so far. How about Pitt? Is this sustainable for Mason Heinchel? Penn State looks for a new coach, but the #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown will be the Steelers, the NFL in general. Here to discuss, Chris Adamski from The Trib. We have Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News, Chris Mueller from 93.7 The Fan. We have two Chris's, so I have to be specific here, and we'll start with you, Chris Mueller. And that would be the Steelers. Now, what we saw the other night, it's been a wild weekend of games and finishes, but the Steeler game is, what defense are we supposed to believe this is? What we saw in weeks 1, 2, and 3 and Thursday, or the two in between there where they actually played pretty good defense? Which is it?
I mean, I think that it's telling that they played pretty good defense against Dylan Gabriel making, his second career NFL start, and Carson Wentz, who's kind of, like we don't know what Carson Wentz is or isn't. It's bad that Mike Tomlin gave us the whole Joe Flacco's the boogeyman. Why did they trade the boogeyman to the next team on my schedule? How dare they? And then went out and it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think you're seeing a couple of things come to bear, though, with this defense. If they don't get home to the quarterback, they're not going to be able to cover good receivers down the field. Chase is, I think, the best in the league personally, and Higgins is not that far behind him. So I think that they are what they have been for a lot of years, dependent on their pass rush. And I don't know about Mike and Chris Adamski. Great planning, by the way, to have us both here, Chris. Let's just answer each other's questions when we're not supposed to. I don't love hearing Jamar Chase say, we knew what they were going to do, and we were glad they did it. Yeah, we've seen this before, and we were happy that they did it. That, above all else, Mike, is the thing for me.
They saw it last year and they scored 18 points, I think, in the second game, and they got handled in the first game. So I'm not sure how much I buy that, because it's a completely different secondary. What I don't get right now, I mean, who are they right now? They are the team that was on the field last. But who will they be next couple of weeks? That's up to them. They have to get better. But when they traded Minkah Fitzpatrick, they effectively de-emphasized the free safety position. And they haven't redefined it in any way. They are getting nothing out of that position. Minkah was a very important player. Even though he wasn't getting picks and all that the last couple of years, he was still a very important player. And that position is giving them nothing. And the three corners that were supposed to redefine the secondary have not redefined it at all, unless you've redefined it into a sieve.
The most alarming part is that they were pretty upfront organizationally from the top on down, all the way Omar Khan, Andy Weidel, Mike Tomlin, the defensive coordinator, all the players in the secondary. They redid the secondary to match up against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Specifically, that's what it was done for.
Specifically for that team, they play twice a year, and they knew they have to probably get through or finish ahead of to get where they want to go. And for that to happen, in that sense, they have 16 catches and get a touchdown from each of them. And essentially, you just knew they weren't able to, that became a track meet in the fourth quarter where whoever had the ball last was going to win, essentially, because of the fact they couldn't stop them with their secondary that was tailor-made, supposedly, to stop the Cincinnati Bengals.
Well, the thing that was the most bizarre about it was that they clearly did not attack on the pass rush the way they have many times, including in recent weeks, against Cleveland in particular, because they were concerned about, well, if we go there and we don't get home, they might catch a lot of passes for a lot of yards. And they caught a lot of passes for a lot of yards. So the plan didn't work. And what was shocking to me was that in many occasions we have seen them really struggle in the first half, go into halftime and say, okay, let's not do that anymore, let's do this, this, and this, and then come out in the second half and be a completely different defense. They were not different at all. They were still poor.
Chris, I want to ask you about the run game, because I think this factors into it, because right off the bat, the run game failed them, which may have contributed to them not going after the quarterback. Cincinnati had 0 runs of like 13 yards or more, and in this game, they just ripped them to shreds. How does that happen, knowing that they were ineffective all season long, and yet here they are, gouging the Steelers?
I think the most jarring thing that happened in the game probably was that getting beat up front by an offensive line that had beaten nobody man for man and gotten the better of a team and pushed anybody around. And that did open it up even more for Joe Flacco. Like, if you're going to get beat by Chase and Higgins, okay, oh well, and Joe Flacco, your old nemesis, you don't expect to be giving up, what was it, something like 10 yards a run to Chase Brown.
9-8, yeah, that's crazy.
This also applies quickly to the secondary. They looked old. They looked like a team that was relying on Ramsey, who's 30, Watt, who's in his 30s, Hayward's, who's 30, Darius Slay's 34, going on, looks like 45 when he's trying to cover some of these guys. So they made this such an all-in year with their defense, and they acquired a lot of old guys to go with old guys here, not spring chickens. And when it looks good, when they're fresh and ready and whatever, it looks really good. When they're on a short week against a team and a quarterback that knows what to do against them, it can look very ugly.
Yeah, and also, Chris, some of the tackling in that game. I looked at that Higgins play over and over again, 29-yard touchdown. It's almost as if it was like, okay, he's going to go in there. We're not going to make an effort. And we saw Peyton Wilson run down a guy in Dublin, and we didn't see that sort of effort. I don't know if it was just confusion, miscommunication. We've heard that a lot.
To tie the topics together, the turning point of the game was the 37-yard run by Chase Brown. They're 37 and 27. Think about it. Those two runs he had in the second quarter, only a few minutes apart, a drive apart, or two drives apart, accounted for more rushing yards in those two plays than the Bengals had averaged all season long up to this point. The Steelers have done such a good job. The first two games, they allowed 9 runs of 10 yards or more from running backs, only 3 from running backs in the 3 games since during their 3-game winning streak. And that just completely went out the window against a team that you wouldn't think should be able to run the ball, had just, over the offseason lost their longtime featured back. Chase Brown, a nice back, maybe he's a third down type guy, but you don't expect to see that.
He's a good player. I'm going to defend Chase Brown on the merits here. He's a very good player, but you saw everybody else was able to bottle him up.
Yeah, they had no success.
That long run, by the way, is emblematic. You mentioned tackling issues, you guys. Joey Porter Jr., what does he do here? It's the Office Space scene. What would you say you do here? You don't really cover all that well because you get worked over by T. Higgins. Jamar Chase is just gleefully shoving him out of the way twice on one play. That looks like a bad pick right now because he was supposed to be the young lion of these 3 corners that Mike is referencing, and the older guy, Jalen Ramsey's still the all-world player in theory and Slay's the KG veteran. Porter's supposed to be holding up his end of the deal, and he's not.
Mike, I want to ask you about some good things that happened. One of them was Pat Freiermuth. Now, I wonder, all 4 touchdown passes went to tight ends.
Right.
And I bring this up because the trade deadline in the NFL is coming up in 2 weeks. They're still looking for that so-called number 2 receiver. We haven't seen a lot of passes to those guys, and specifically touchdown passes. What do you think they're going to do?
Well, I know what I would do, and although if someone wanted to offer me a second wide receiver that was capable, I certainly wouldn't turn it down. I think they need a safety more than they need a wide receiver. I really do. They don't have a starting quality free safety on their roster now. He's not there. They've been through a half dozen games now. If they haven't seen that now, they have a combined 2 passes defensed from 2 safeties. That's Clark and Thornhill. That's not going to get it done. Especially not when guys are getting past your corners and you need some help and you're not getting it.
This wide receiver thing where they've been telling us essentially, we know, I mean, not telling us literally, but there have been reports they've been sniffing around these wide receivers. Last year, the same thing. They're a lot more open about it last year at this time. And eventually then the trade deadline came, whether it was last man available or whatever, and Mike Williams, they brought in Mike Williams. They'll bring in somebody. Roman Wilson actually showing some, or them more so the organization showing faith in Roman Wilson. It was the point where, think about it, Calvin Austin was injured, didn't play the game on last Sunday. Roman Wilson still doesn't play. That kind of showed where he is in the organizational hierarchy. They kind of gave him a shot Thursday, but he's not the answer for the rest of this season if this team wants to get where it needs to go.
I think they're going to make a very minor move, if anything, and pretty much go with what they've got. And unfortunately for Mike, I don't think they have any intentions for trading for a safety or any kind of real help. I think it'll be a very underwhelming name, if anything, that they get at wide receiver.
Next up, Green Bay Packers. That's a Sunday night game, and the Steelers play better on Sunday night than they do Thursday night, where that record against division foes fell to 0-7. When we come back, we're going to talk about some big dealings in college football for both Pitt and Penn State. That's next, right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. All right, welcome back. We're talking about some college football. Penn State, shockingly, for some, got rid of James Franklin a lot earlier than they thought they would. But when you lose back-to-back games to teams that are 20-point underdogs, don't be surprised what happens. Mike DeCourcy, you follow this a lot. Your take on what Penn State did, right or wrong move?
Oh, I think it was the wrong move. I don't look. He won 13 games a year ago. That's not easy to do. Their principal sin as a football program under James Franklin, principal sin was that they weren't as good as Ohio State, and no one else is either. Ohio State's the best program in the country right now. They weren't as good. I don't think you make your decisions based on that. I believe if you are in the picture, then eventually you might shine in the picture. I think you look at Michigan State with Tom Izzo, especially Matt Painter at Purdue in basketball, and then in football, you look at some of the coaches that have been Let go Paul Chryst at Wisconsin. They would like to have the Paul Chryst years back now. I think that was a mistake to make, and I think there's one guy, I think, that they could get, that they might be able to get, and that's Jeff Brom at Louisville, who I think would make a difference. I think anybody else is just changing, guys changing chairs.
Man, I remember a younger Chris Mueller being warned by Mike DeCourcy, be careful what you wish for when Pitt got rid of Jamie, or, was not, unhappy to see Jamie Dixon leave, and Pitt has never really gotten back to that standing. But in true Chris Mueller fashion, live and don't learn. I think it was the right move. I think, like most people who thought it was eventually going to happen, I thought it would be after the season. To me, there's a couple factors as to why it happened when it did. I think it's an impulsive thing by Pat Kraft. I think he was pretty ticked off by the James Franklin, give me a new contract this last summer, because there were the stories coming out that he was trying to leverage more, he wanted more. And then when you do the one thing that you've never done as Penn State head coach of a really good supposed Penn State team, lose to bad teams in humiliating fashion, it reaches that boiling point where I think the pressure release valve gets hit. Their problem is, as you put it, I think Brom's an interesting name. The name that I'm sure they wanted to go after said, nah, I'm just going to stay at Indiana.
Yeah.
What a world we're living in. Kurt Cignetti's like, yeah, no, I've got all these billionaires here. They want to pay me $11.5 million. So I think it could be one of those situations where you could argue it was the right move because it was just very toxic there, and it clearly was, and that they might not find a guy or two guys for the next two times that they have to rehire for this job who are as good as he was.
Cignetti goes from $425,000 4 years ago to making $11.6. That's the state of college sports as we know it.
IUP less than a decade ago, right?
Good work if you can get it, Chris.
So what do you think?
It's definitely a risk, right? You brought up Wisconsin and Paul Chryst. Twice Nebraska did it over a 2-decade span or whatever it is. And when you're at where Penn State is, I really think you should know what you are. Knowing what you are as a program, as a person, very important. And you referenced Pitt basketball. You could even go back to Pitt football, maybe with Wanstead, where they were. Penn State is probably not a top 3 program winning national. They're not going to be Alabama, right?
Right.
If you're not happy with being top 10, you should probably know who you are. That being said, I think everything in the way those 3 losses happened, everything was getting stale. I think to a point, James was kind of miserable, you know what I'm saying? I just think
I don't think he was happy there. I don't think James Franklin, unless times were boom time at all times, was ever going to be thrilled to be the biggest name in State College, Pennsylvania. There's a reason he tried to get the USC job. I think James Franklin sees himself as a bigger city guy, as a guy who can do something like that on a bigger stage. Well, Columbus ain't coming open anytime soon. No. And that is the difference here. We all talk about know your place where you are. They are in a very unique and weird spot. I mean, there is the alpha dog of the sport is above them right now. And then I'm sure it doesn't help Pat Kraft when you see upstart Indiana getting it done, Oregon's just clipping right along still, and you're kind of the same Penn State you've been for how many years now?
It's funny how it goes. Ryan Day this time last year was, going to Michigan. If they lose that game, he could be out. He was talked about being out, and now here is new contract, national champ. We're going to talk about Pitt when we come back. What kind of run could they go on in the ACC after they win again yesterday? There are some good teams in the ACC. There's some bad teams. Where do they fit in? That's next, right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. All right, we're back talking about Pitt, which came off a win yesterday at Syracuse. Not as aesthetic as previous ones, but Mason Heinchel got it done, and he did it by using his legs and his arm. Syracuse is bad. Chris Adamski, well, they are. I mean, let's face it, they are. But it's still a win.
Filippone's had a bad enough week. You're going to pile on him if he's watching this show? My goodness.
That's another topic. We'll show that when the time comes. But in the meantime, this is pretty encouraging. But he's a freshman, a true freshman. They have a game against NC State, and then it really gets tough in the ACC. How do you see them faring the rest of the way?
I mean, here's the thing. It's right in front of them all of a sudden. It's crazy how quick almost lives at Penn. If you go back to September 28th at about 7 p.m. or actually 10 p.m. and where these two programs were and the trajectory of both from that moment on in terms of Pitt just blew a lead at home and they lost to West Virginia. It was a really, talk about bad. Do you think Syracuse is bad? West Virginia is pretty bad. But they have it in front of them. I'm not saying they'll beat Notre Dame, but it's right there for them. Now, is Heinchel, his name, did I say that right?
You got him.
You got it.
Okay. You got him.
If Heinchel, I don't think I think he is what he appears so far. But it was only about 10 months ago, Pitt had this great freshman quarterback who was supposed to be the future, and he ended up getting benched 4 games in the next season. So we'll see how that plays out. But all you can ask for if you're Pitt is, I mean, I don't want to say they can make the playoff, but they have it in front of them to do it right now.
Yeah, the schedule's really hard. It's very, especially for a program that's trying to find itself, a team that's trying to find itself. I really like Mason. I think he's very talented. It's going to have to be better than he was against the Qs if he wants to get over some of those hurdles. Miami is the most obvious, but there are several games coming up that are really challenging. If he plays the way he did coming out of the chute, out of the starting blocks, he was really good the first time. The more stuff gets thrown at him, the more I think it starts to clog the system a little bit. But eventually he might get over the hump, because I think he's really skilled. I think he's really gifted. And he gives them a chance in a lot of games that they wouldn't have had a chance.
He's very confident too, Chris.
Well, the factor matters in college more than it probably does in the pros. In the pros, you can have all the swagger you want. If you can't play, it's not going to matter. But like Pavia at Vanderbilt is an awesome example of a guy who can play, who's got swagger. He's elevated the program. And the whispers, as soon as this move was made, were that some of the players maybe kind of had a feeling that this kid was better than Eli, that he was having way better practices in the fall. Pat was even maybe noticing, and they just hung on with the veteran. They're probably undefeated the way Heinschel has largely played. If they probably don't blow the Louisville lead. They definitely don't lose to West Virginia. The problem for them with the schedule, and the kid can scoot too, so when things break down, he can run. That's the other thing. They have physical teams. Georgia Tech wants to beat you up. Notre Dame wants to beat you up. They just beat up USC. Miami lost, but they want to beat you up front. And so does Pitt have the depth to even hang in there in all three of those games? They have, like, as always with Pitt, the high-end talent to, like, give you fits. I think they're the hardest team left for Miami and Notre Dame. It's just like you're going to go through a crucible in that 3-week stretch.
But, Mike, I'd love to see Pitt and Notre Dame both at what would be 5-2 records. That would be something to watch, regardless of what happens, just the hype leading into it.
And Pitt has given Notre Dame some real tough goes over the last decade and a half. Some of the most difficult games that Notre Dame's had, with the exception of the games they've lost. I mean, they did upset them once as well.
I still remember a phantom pass interference call on K1 Williams that ruined a Pitt upset over a then number 1 or 2 Notre Dame. Huh.
So, plus the Notre Dame game, when you think about it, is the least important of those 3 games because they want to hang in the
Georgia
ACC
Tech,
race,
Miami,
get into the ACC title game, and you win the ACC, you're automatically in.
Yeah, we got to take a break on that note, Chris. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Penguins. And the Penguins are 4-2. Not many people saw that, and they had a very successful West Coast trip. We'll talk about where they are and what we see in the future next, right here on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. All right, welcome back. Talking about the Penguins. Here we are 2 weeks into this. They're 4-2, and they're playing really good hockey right now. They're getting some decent goaltending and a good mixture of young and old together. So, Chris, I want to ask you about this. Do you think this is somewhat sustainable? A lot of people thought this would be a year where they just ended up in last place in their division and draft high and be in the lottery for McKenna. To me, they have a pretty good mix going on. Can it last?
Yeah, we'll see how much it lasts. I think this proves that as much as Mike Sullivan is owed a lot by the city and by the organization and should be beloved and he got a good reception, that the coaching change was needed. And to have all these new faces, a lot of young, of course, 2 18-year-old players. You have some more other rookies, younger type players. Also, veterans, kind of the last chance saloon. They're sort of their philosophy right now, bringing in guys that are kind of on their last legs and maybe give them a shot, but have had previous talent, have high salaries. They're buying into the system. They're playing a very structured game. They're beating teams, which I can't believe I say that because there's not many teams that should be worse than them right now, but they're beating the teams that are worse than them. And Mike, you pointed off the air, they've only played one bad game so far in the 6 games they've played.
Yeah, the Rangers game was obviously a disaster, but they were really good in the 4 victories, and even in the defeat, they would have gotten minimum a point if they hadn't had the one player, the defenseman.
In the Anaheim game, right?
Yeah, try to get the puck out. If he plays it low, up the boards, they probably get the point. He tries to bank it off the glass. It flies out. They give up the power play goal and they lose. So I like what they're doing. I like the aggressiveness in the opposing zone. They're making it really hard for teams to get out. They're being efficient with their chances. They're getting all of those chances that you used to see teams get against the Penguins and say, how come the Penguins never get any of those?
I think it's easier to get a team with a lot of young players to play a system from a new coach. Yeah. I mean, we know in the NHL, the Penguins are not unique. They might be the best example of it. Guys just get stale after a while, and what worked doesn't keep working. I'm of the opinion, though, I don't think you're going to get a Washington Capitals situation here where they rebuild on the fly and no one thought that they were going to be good and they just raced right to the playoffs again. They still have a very bad blue line, all things considered. And they still have one especially terrible goalie that they're paying $5 million a year.
He was good last night.
But if Murashov was up there or something like that and they were saying, we think our best goalie is right here and we're going to play him, that would be one thing. I think this is probably going to peter out. Get back to me, a week.
We will.
A week after Halloween, if they're still like the fourth best team in the East or something like that, okay, then we'll start taking it on a case-by-case basis. But I still think the bottom is going to fall out, which is probably as Kyle Dubas intended.
Yeah, but they are getting good production of Ben Kindle and Harrison Brunick, and I hope those guys hang around because they look like they're ready for this right now. All right, I want to tell you about number one Cochran. If you're in the market for a new vehicle, don't settle for anything less than number one Cochran Kia's clearly better car buying experience. You can enjoy exclusive clear-cut pricing where you get their most competitive offer and you get it up front. Take advantage of exceptional lease and finance rates and choose from a lineup of nearly 200 new models. Experience clearly better car buying at number one Cochran Kia. You can do it in store, online, cochrankia.com. Before we go, time for a final prediction. Steelers, Chris Mueller, and Packers. Who wins?
Packers, unfortunately.
I think they might. I think the Steelers are going to bounce back in that.
Sunday night, right? They should.
The Packers have been very underwhelming this season so far. Steelers win.
There we go. That's going to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us here on the number one Cochran Sports Showdown. We'll do it again next Sunday night, and we'll be live after the Steelers and Packers, so join us for that, and have a good week.